On Friday, June 13, 2025, the world awoke to a reality few expected. Israeli fighter jets had launched a massive airstrike deep inside Iran. The attack, which began in the early hours before sunrise, caught not only Iran but the entire international community off guard. As the first reports trickled in, confusion and disbelief spread across newsrooms and government offices worldwide. The skies above Tehran, usually quiet at dawn, were suddenly filled with the roar of engines and the distant thunder of explosions. Operation Rising Lion was not a covert action, it was a direct act of war, shattering the fragile calm just days before crucial US-Iran talks. The operation was meticulously planned, involving dozens of aircraft and advanced weaponry, and its timing was no accident. With the world's attention focused on upcoming diplomatic negotiations, Israel's leaders made a calculated decision to strike first, believing that waiting any longer would be too great a risk. For decades, Israel and Iran fought in the shadows, through proxies, cyber attacks, and assassinations. Their rivalry shaped the region but rarely erupted into open conflict. Intelligence agencies waged silent wars, and both sides used covert means to undermine each other's security and ambitions. The world grew used to this uneasy balance where threats were real but rarely visible. This strike ended that era, thrusting their conflict into the open. The rules of engagement had changed overnight, and the world was forced to confront the possibility of a much larger war. The attack was not just a military operation, it was a message, broadcast in fire and steel, that the old boundaries no longer applied. Explosions rocked Tehran, signaling a dangerous new chapter. Sirens wailed through the city as emergency crews rushed to the scenes of destruction. Residents, shaken from their sleep, scrambled for safety, unsure if more attacks would follow. The sense of vulnerability was palpable, not just in Iran, but across the region. The United Nations' recent ceasefire resolution was instantly rendered meaningless. Diplomatic efforts that had taken months to negotiate were swept aside in a matter of minutes. World leaders scrambled to respond, calling emergency meetings and issuing urgent statements, but the damage was already done. Israel's message was clear: it would act alone to protect itself, regardless of global opinion. The government stood firm, insisting that national security came before international approval. Protests erupted in capitals around the world, but Israel's leaders showed no sign of backing down. The world was left reeling, asking, why now? Analysts and citizens alike searched for answers, debating whether this was a preemptive strike or a reckless gamble. The sudden escalation sent shockwaves through financial markets and diplomatic circles, as everyone tried to make sense of the new reality. Israel's defense minister claimed intelligence showed an imminent Iranian attack on Israeli cities. According to officials, intercepted communications and satellite imagery pointed to preparations for a major assault. The government argued that waiting would have put millions of lives at risk. In their view, waiting was not an option. They struck first to disrupt Iran's plans. The decision was made in the highest levels of government, after intense debate and consultation with military advisors. For Israel, the cost of inaction was simply too high, but to many, it looked like a reckless escalation, risking a regional war. Critics warned that the strike could ignite a chain reaction, drawing in neighboring countries and destabilizing the entire Middle East. The fear of a wider conflict loomed large, as governments weighed their next moves. The Middle East was now on an unpredictable, perilous path. With alliances shifting and old certainties shattered, the world watched anxiously, knowing that the events of this dawn raid would echo for years to come. Operation Rising Lion was the culmination of years of rising tension. The shadow war between Israel and Iran had grown more direct, with Iran launching massive missile and drone attacks in 2024. Israel's responses were calculated, targeting Iranian military sites and proxies, aiming to deter without sparking all-out war. But the cycle of attacks made the region a powder keg. The Gaza war, ongoing since October 2023, had weakened Iran's allies but not its resolve. Iran deepened ties with Russia and China, emboldening its stance. The name Rising Lion itself was a message. Israel's strategy was sustained, not a one-off. The shadow war was over, open conflict had begun. The stakes had never been higher. Just after 3 a.m., under the cover of darkness, Israeli warplanes F-35S and F-15S swept across the skies, penetrating deep into Iranian airspace. Using advanced electronic warfare and stealth technology, they managed to evade Iran's sophisticated air defense systems, catching the country off guard. This was no limited raid, it was a sweeping, meticulously coordinated assault on Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure. Multiple squadrons struck simultaneously, targeting facilities spread across hundreds of miles, from uranium enrichment plants to air bases and radar installations. Explosions lit up the night sky over Tehran and other major cities, as key sites erupted in fire and smoke. The thunder of detonations echoed for miles and emergency sirens wailed through the darkness as first responders rushed to the scenes. Israel's targets went far beyond nuclear facilities. Command centers, missile production plants, and drone assembly factories were all hit in rapid succession, aiming to paralyze Iran's ability to coordinate and launch future attacks. The goal was clear: to cripple Iran's war-making ability for years to come, setting back its military ambitions and sending a message that its most guarded assets were vulnerable. Israel claimed it was preempting an imminent attack, but the scale and precision of the operation suggested a broader, long-term strategy. Officials spoke of self-defense, but the world saw a demonstration of overwhelming force. By striking so deeply and so widely, Israel crossed a red line, sending a direct and unmistakable message to Iran's leadership. No target was beyond reach, and no threat would go unanswered. The breadth of the operation was staggering. From the capital to remote military outposts, no part of Iran was safe from Israeli reach. The entire nation was put on high alert, as uncertainty and fear spread rapidly. The attack was psychological as much as physical, meant to shake Iran's confidence, disrupt daily life, and sow doubt among its leaders and citizens about their security. In Israel, the mood was tense. Many felt relief that action had been taken, but anxiety simmered beneath the surface, as everyone knew retaliation was inevitable and the cycle of conflict far from over. The government's narrative of self-defense resonated with much of the public, but fear of escalation and the unknown consequences ran deep, sparking debate and protest in the streets. The lion had roared. Israel had shown its strength. Now, the nation and the world waited anxiously to see how Iran would respond and what the next chapter in this dangerous standoff would bring. As dawn broke, the world braced for what would come next, knowing that the repercussions of this night would echo far beyond the Middle East. Iran's response was immediate fury and vows of revenge. For years, Iran relied on proxies, Hezbollah, Houthis, militias, to avoid direct war. But after October 2023, Iran grew bolder, launching direct attacks on Israel. Operation Rising Lion was Israel's answer to this new aggression. Iran's threats to abandon nuclear treaties and build new facilities only heightened tensions. Now, after the Israeli strike, Iran's credibility is on the line. Retaliate and risk a regional war. Hold back and risk looking weak. The regime faces a perilous choice with no easy escape. The world's reaction was swift and divided. The US, caught off guard, had pushed for diplomacy, but now scrambled to contain the fallout. The strike torpedoed peace talks and defied a UN ceasefire resolution. Russia and China condemned Israel, calling for emergency UN action. Europe urged restraint but criticized Israel's escalation. Arab states issued mixed responses, some condemned, others watched silently. The attack forced evacuations and heightened security across the region. Trust between key players was shattered, making future diplomacy far harder. The Middle East was now on high alert, with the world fearing a wider war. The world stands on the brink of a major war. Tensions are at an all-time high, and every decision made in the coming hours could tip the balance between peace and chaos. Leaders gather in urgent meetings while ordinary people everywhere hold their breath, hoping for a peaceful resolution, but fearing the worst. Iran must retaliate, but how? The options are all fraught with danger. A massive missile barrage could devastate cities and provoke immediate counterstrikes. A Hezbollah attack from Lebanon might open a new front, drawing in even more players. Covert strikes could escalate quietly, but risk spiraling out of control. Each path carries the threat of catastrophic escalation, and none offer a clear way out. Any major conflict would send shockwaves through the global economy. Oil prices would skyrocket overnight, fueling inflation and panic in markets worldwide. Trade routes could be blocked, halting the flow of goods and crippling industries far beyond the Middle East. The fragile world economy, already under strain, could be pushed to the breaking point. The United States would almost certainly be drawn in to defend Israel, its closest ally in the region. Russia and China, both with their own interests at stake, might back Iran, turning a regional conflict into a dangerous global standoff. The risk of miscalculation between nuclear powers would loom over every move. What starts as a regional war could quickly spiral into a global crisis, with the United Nations scrambling to broker peace and military forces on high alert across continents. Refugee flows would surge as civilians flee violence, overwhelming neighboring countries and straining humanitarian resources. Governments could be destabilized, and extremist groups might seize the chaos to expand their influence, threatening security far beyond the conflict zone. The decisions made in Tehran and Jerusalem now affect everyone, from policymakers in distant capitals to families watching events unfold on their screens. The world waits anxiously for their next moves. The world is not a bystander. It has a stake in preventing disaster. People everywhere demand action, calling for diplomacy, restraint, and a renewed commitment to peace. The next moves will shape global security for years to come. Every negotiation, every decision, and every act of restraint or aggression will echo across generations. The stakes could not be higher. The world stands at a crossroads, and what happens next will define the future for us all. Operation Rising Lion has pushed the Middle East to its most dangerous moment in decades. The risks of miscalculation are immense. Escalation seems almost inevitable. The world's urgent task is to pull both sides back from the brink. Diplomacy must create an off-ramp for Iran and pressure Israel to show restraint. Most people in the region, and the world, do not want war. The crisis is driven by leaders' decisions, not the will of ordinary citizens. The hope for peace is fragile, but real. The coming weeks will test whether wisdom can prevail over anger. The true test of strength is not war, but the courage to choose peace. The world waits, hoping it's not too late.